A 10-year-old boy entered the Vampire King's castle with only $10, pleading for help to find his missing brother. The king could have dismissed him with laughter. Instead, he accepted the money, gave his word, and learned that even the smallest gesture of trust can awaken something human in an immortal creature. The guards at Castle Nightfall had been trembling for 3 hours straight. "There's a child outside," Marcus whispered, his crossbow shaking in his grip. "Standing at the gate. He's been there since sunset." His partner, an older man named Bill, peered through the iron bars. A small figure stood motionless in the moonlight, barely tall enough to reach the door handle. The boy wore a red jacket several sizes too large and worn-out sneakers. "He'll get himself killed," Bill muttered. "We should send him away before..." "Before what?" Marcus's voice cracked. "Before we open that door and the king catches the scent of fresh human blood? Are you out of your mind?" Yet the boy remained. He simply stood there, staring at the castle entrance with a determination that unsettled grown men. Finally, after what seemed like forever, he raised one small fist and knocked. The sound reverberated through the stone halls like thunder. Both guards jumped back, nearly dropping their weapons. No one knocked on the Vampire King's door, not if they valued their life. "Don't answer it," Marcus hissed. Too late. The massive oak doors groaned open by themselves, revealing a throne room illuminated by hundreds of flickering candles. There, seated on a throne carved from dark wood and silver, sat King Aldrich. He matched the stories precisely, pale skin that seemed luminous in the candlelight, jet black hair cascading past his shoulders, and eyes that burned crimson when light struck them. He wore a plain black shirt and dark pants, nothing elaborate. Yet somehow this made him more frightening. He required no crown to command authority. The air itself seemed to yield around him. The boy walked in without hesitation. Marcus made a strangled noise. "Get back!" But the boy continued walking, his sneakers squeaking against the polished stone floor. He approached the throne directly, stopping approximately 10 feet away, and reached into his jacket pocket. Aldrich raised one eyebrow. For a creature who had lived over 8 centuries, he had witnessed countless things, but a human child marching into his home after dark, that was unprecedented. "You're either remarkably brave," Aldrich said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous, "or remarkably foolish." The boy pulled out a crumpled $10 bill and held it up with both hands. "I need to hire you," the boy said. His voice wavered, but he stood his ground. "My name is Milo Chin. I'm 10 years old, and my brother is missing." Aldrich leaned forward slightly, intrigued despite himself. "Missing?" "Jonah, he's 15. He vanished 2 nights ago near Rivertown, Millbrook, you know it. Mom and Dad contacted the police, but they said he probably just ran away. But Jonah wouldn't do that. He wouldn't leave without telling me." Milo's voice cracked on the last words, but he kept his chin raised. "I've heard stories about you. They say you can track anything, anyone, so I figured to hire you with $10. It's everything I have," Milo said quickly. "I was saving it to buy Jonah a birthday cake next week, chocolate, his favorite." He blinked rapidly, fighting back tears, but finding him matters more than cake. The throne room fell silent except for the soft crackling of candles. Aldrich studied the boy with ancient eyes that had witnessed empires rise and fall. This child had walked past his reputation, past the legends of blood and terror, past every human survival instinct, simply to offer $10 for help no one else would provide. "Why me?" Aldrich asked quietly. "Why not hire a detective? A search party?" "Because adults don't listen to children," Mila said, sounding much older than 10. "They smile and pat our heads and tell us everything will be fine. But I know something's wrong. I can feel it. And everyone says you're the most terrifying thing in the entire state. So I figured if something dangerous took Jonah, only something more dangerous could bring him back." Aldrich almost smiled. "Almost. Do you know what I am, child?" "A vampire," Milo said without hesitation. "You drink blood. You're incredibly strong and fast. You've killed people." He shifted his weight nervously. "But the stories also say you have rules, that you don't harm children and that you keep your word." "The stories say many things. Are those parts true?" Aldrich rose from his throne, and though he wasn't particularly tall, perhaps 6 feet, the movement made him seem enormous. He descended the steps slowly, each footfall deliberate, until he stood directly before Milo. Up close, the boy could see the inhuman perfection of Aldrich's features, the way his skin appeared almost translucent, the faint scent of old books and older blood that surrounded him. Milo's heart pounded so forcefully it echoed in the silent room. Aldrich reached out one pale hand. Milo flinched, but didn't retreat. The Vampire King plucked the $10 bill from Milo's trembling fingers, held it up to the candlelight, and examined it as though it were made of gold. "This is a terrible bargain for me," Aldrich said finally. "I should throw you out." Milo's face fell. "However," Aldrich continued, tucking the bill into his shirt pocket, "I find myself curious. It's been decades since anyone surprised me, and you, Milo Chin, have done precisely that." His red eyes gleamed. "I accept your offer. I will find your brother." The relief that washed over Milo's face was so profound that even Aldrich felt something strange twist in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in centuries. Concern, perhaps. "Thank you," Milo breathed. "Thank you so much." "But you'll accompany me," Aldrich interrupted. "I normally work alone, but if we're going to find Jonah, I need you to show me where he disappeared. Besides," he added with a slight smirk, "I should protect my investment. Can't have you getting into more trouble." Milo nodded eagerly. "When do we start?" Aldrich glanced toward the window where the moon hung full and bright in the October sky. He said, "Right now, we hunt at night." Behind them, Marcus and Bill watched in stunned silence as the most feared vampire in America walked out of his castle with a 10-year-old boy at his side, heading into the darkness to chase shadows and find answers. Neither guard could shake the feeling that something significant had just begun, something that would change everything. The drive to Millbrook took 40 minutes in Aldrich's black car, an old Cadillac that smelled of leather and something Milo couldn't quite identify. The Vampire King drove in silence, his eyes fixed on the dark road ahead, while Milo pressed his face against the window, watching the world blur past. "Tell me about that night," Aldrich said suddenly, "when Jonah disappeared. Every detail matters." Milo sat up straighter. He said he was meeting his friend Tommy at the old boat dock. They were fishing before school the next day. "Jonah likes fishing early, says the fish bite better at dawn." He swallowed hard. "But Tommy called our house the next morning asking where Jonah was. He never showed up and nobody saw anything. Mrs. Patterson, she lives near the river, said she heard a car around midnight, but she hears cars all the time, so she didn't think much of it." Milo's hands twisted together in his lap. "The police found his bike by the dock. The chain was broken, like someone cut it." Aldrich's grip tightened on the steering wheel, but he said nothing. They reached Millbrook just as the first gray light of dawn began creeping across the horizon. Aldrich parked near the edge of town, far from the main streets, and pulled a dark hood over his head. Direct sunlight would be inconvenient, he explained, catching Milo's curious look. "But shadows and early morning I can manage. Stay close." The boat dock sat at the edge of Millbrook River, a sad collection of rotting wooden planks and rusted posts that nobody had maintained in years. Milo led Aldrich to where the police had found Jonah's bike, a blue 10-speed now leaning against the patrol station's evidence room. But Aldrich wasn't interested in the bike. He crouched low, his fingers brushing the dirt, his eyes scanning the ground with inhuman precision. He moved like liquid shadow, covering the entire dock area in minutes, reading the earth like a book only he could decipher. "Here," he said finally, pointing to a patch of disturbed soil near the water's edge. "Your brother stood here for approximately 15 minutes, waiting for his friend." His finger traced an invisible line toward the parking area. Then he heard something, walked this way, curious, not afraid. Milo followed, his heart pounding. Aldrich stopped near a wooden post. Scattered glass glittered in the early light, the remains of a lantern. He brought light, smart boy, but someone destroyed it. He knelt down, his nose nearly touching the ground, inhaling deeply. Boot prints, heavy, military grade. 3 men, possibly 4. Vampires? Milo whispered, terrified of the answer. Aldrich's head snapped up, his eyes blazing red for just a moment before fading back to their normal dark crimson. No, men. That made no sense. Milo had assumed a vampire took Jonah, that's why he'd sought out the Vampire King for help. But humans? Aldrich stood and walked in a wide circle, following tracks invisible to Milo's eyes. Then he stopped abruptly, staring at something on the ground. He reached down and picked up a small metal object, turning it over in his pale fingers. It was a crest, a circular badge made of silver, engraved with a cross wrapped in barbed wire. Aldrich's expression darkened. Hunters. Like animal hunters? No. Vampire hunters. Humans who hunt my kind. He clutched the crest tightly, and Milo could swear he saw anger flash across the ancient king's face. This is the symbol of the Silverthorn Guild. They're organized, well-funded, and extremely dangerous. But why would vampire hunters take Jonah? Milo's voice rose in panic. He's not a vampire. He's just a regular kid who likes fishing and basketball. I don't know yet, Aldrich interrupted, though his jaw tightened. That was a lie. He knew exactly why they'd taken Jonah, and the realization made something dark and furious coil in his chest. Bait. They'd taken the boy as bait, because somehow, some way, the Silverthorn Guild had learned that Aldrich had a vulnerability, a dangerous weakness he'd kept hidden for decades. He didn't kill children. He'd never killed children. And apparently someone had noticed. They'd taken Jonah knowing that eventually someone would come asking questions. Perhaps they expected Jonah's parents, perhaps local law enforcement, but they certainly didn't expect Milo to walk straight into a vampire's castle with $10 and a desperate plea. And now Aldrich was here, exactly where they wanted him. "We need to move," Aldrich said abruptly, pocketing the crest. "If hunters took your brother, they won't keep him here. They'll relocate him somewhere more secure." "Where?" "That's what we're going to discover." Aldrich looked towards the brightening sky with something almost like concern. "But first, we need information, and in human towns, information flows through markets and gossip." "You mean we're going shopping?" Milo asked incredulously. Aldrich's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. "Something like that. We have work to do before the sun climbs too high." As they walked back towards the car, Milo didn't notice Aldrich glance back at the dock one more time, his expression grim. The Vampire King had already made an important decision. He wouldn't tell Milo the truth about the bait, not yet. The boy carried enough fear already. But Aldrich would find Jonah, and when he did, the Silverthorn Guild would learn what happened when you used children as pawns against a king who had survived 8 centuries of war. By mid-morning, they'd reached Crossroads, a bustling market town 30 miles north of Millbrook, where farmers, traders, and travelers converged every Saturday. The main street thrummed with activity, vendors shouting prices, children weaving between stalls, the smell of fresh bread and roasted corn filling the air. Aldrich kept his hood low and his movements careful, staying in the shadows of awnings and buildings. The sun wouldn't kill him, but it would weaken him considerably. More importantly, it would draw unwanted attention. "Stay beside me," Aldrich murmured to Milo. "Don't wander off, and if anyone asks, I'm your uncle." "You don't look anything like my family," Milo pointed out. "Distant, uncle. Very distant." They moved through the market systematically, Aldrich's eyes scanning faces while listening to conversations with his supernaturally sharp hearing. He caught fragments: gossip about crop prices, complaints about the weather, speculation about the upcoming election. Then, near a fruit stand, he heard it. "Saw him with my own eyes, I swear," a woman in a floral dress whispered to her companion. "The Vampire King walking through town with a child in broad daylight." Her friend scoffed. "Betty, you've been reading too many of those vampire romance novels." "I'm serious. My cousin in Millbrook saw them at dawn. Said the king was looking for something. Or someone." Aldrich steered Milo away quickly, but the damage was done. Word was spreading. He could feel eyes on him now, suspicious glances, hushed conversations stopping abruptly as they passed. "People are staring," Milo whispered nervously. "Let them stare. We need information, and fear makes people talk." Aldrich guided them towards a quieter section of the market, where an old pawn shop sat wedged between 2 larger stores. The sign read, "Burke's Trading Post. We buy anything." Inside, the shop was crammed floor to ceiling with random objects: old guitars, antique clocks, jewelry, weapons. Behind the counter sat a grizzled man with a gray beard and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "We're closed," he said flatly, not looking up from his newspaper. Aldrich placed a single silver coin on the counter. Genuine silver, old enough that the date had worn off, the kind of coin that hadn't been in circulation for over 100 years. Burke's eyes snapped up. He stared at the coin, then at Aldrich's hooded face, then at Milo. "You've got 5 minutes, Burke said, pocketing the coin with practiced ease. "A hunter caravan," Aldrich said quietly. "Silverthorn Guild. They passed through this region in the last 2 days. I need to know where they went." Burke's expression didn't change, but Milo saw his hand drift under the counter, probably towards a weapon. "That's dangerous information, friend. The kind that gets people killed." Aldrich placed 2 more silver coins on the counter. Burke hesitated, then sighed. "North toward the Coldspire Mountains. They stopped here yesterday to resupply, bought rope, lanterns, dried food, enough for a week-long expedition." He paused. "They were transporting something, kept a cargo truck under guard the entire time, wouldn't let anyone near it." Milo's breath caught. Jonah. They had Jonah in that truck. "How many hunters?" Aldrich asked. A dozen, maybe more, heavily armed. They weren't hiding what they were, walked around with their crest showing like they wanted everyone to know. Burks leaned forward slightly. Word of advice, whatever business you have with them isn't worth it. Silverthorn doesn't play games. Neither do I, Aldrich said softly. Burke's eyes widened slightly as recognition dawned. Jesus Christ, you really are him, the king. And he's the kid from the rumors. You're hunting together? He hired me, Aldrich said, with a slight edge of amusement. For what? My brother, Milo blurted out. They took my brother. We're getting him back. Burke's weathered face softened marginally. Kid you, I don't know what they told you, but Silverthorn doesn't just grab random teenagers. If they took your brother, there's a reason, and that reason probably involves... He glanced at Aldrich meaningfully. I'm aware, Aldrich cut him off. The Cold Spire Mountains, how long ago did they leave? 12 hours, give or take. They'll be reaching the foothills by now. Burke pulled out a worn map and spread it across the counter, pointing to a route marked in faded pencil. There's an old logging road that cuts through here, leads to an abandoned outpost the hunters sometimes use as a staging area. If they're planning something significant, that's where they'd set up camp. Aldrich studied the map with intense focus, committing every detail to memory. One more thing, Burke added quietly, the hunters weren't alone. There was someone else with them, a woman in a black coat. Didn't see her face, but she was giving orders. The hunters treated her with respect, even fear. A name? Burke shook his head. Nobody said it out loud, but I heard one of them call her the Collector. Aldrich went very still. Even Milo could sense the shift in his demeanor, a sudden tension that made the air feel heavier. You know her? Milo asked. Of her, Aldrich said grimly. She's a hunter who specializes in capturing vampires alive, for experiments. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. If she's involved, this is far bigger than I thought. They left Burke's shop quickly, stepping back into the busy market street. But now, everywhere they looked, people were watching. Phones came out, photos were snapped. A mother pulled her child behind her skirt as they passed. The Vampire King is here, someone whispered loudly. With a kid? What's he planning? Panic rippled through the crowd like a living thing. Aldrich grabbed Milo's hand firmly. Time to go. Now. They hurried back toward the car as the whispers grew louder, fear spreading like wildfire through Crossroads Market. By sunset, the entire state would know the Vampire King was on the move, and the Silverthorn Guild would be waiting. The logging road was barely a road at all, just two muddy tire tracks cutting through dense forest, overgrown with weeds and broken branches. Aldrich drove slowly, his eyes scanning the darkening woods on either side. The sun had finally set, and Milo could see the tension drain from the Vampire King's shoulders as shadows embraced them. We're close, Aldrich murmured. I can smell campfire smoke and gunpowder. Milo pressed his face to the window, seeing nothing but trees and darkness. How far? Half a mile, perhaps. Less. Then the windshield exploded. Aldrich jerked the wheel hard right as gunfire erupted from the forest. Bullets punched through the car's metal frame with deafening cracks. The Cadillac careened off the road, smashing through underbrush before slamming into a massive oak tree. Out! Now! Aldrich shouted, kicking his door open. Milo fumbled with his seatbelt, his hands shaking violently. Aldrich yanked him through the driver's side door just as another volley of bullets shredded the passenger seat where Milo had been sitting seconds before. Behind the log! Run! They scrambled across the forest floor as muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. Milo dove behind a fallen tree trunk, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst. Aldrich landed beside him with inhuman grace, not even breathing hard. Stay down, Aldrich commanded. Do not move. Do not make a sound. But Aldrich's red eyes blazed in the darkness. Trust me. Then he was gone. Milo pressed himself against the rotting wood, squeezing his eyes shut as the sounds of combat exploded around him. He heard shouting. There! Left flank! Followed by a scream that cut off abruptly. Gunfire, breaking branches, a wet, crunching sound that made his stomach turn. Silver rounds! Use the silver rounds! More gunfire, then a voice filled with terror. Where is he? Where is he? Silence. Then another scream. Milo counted 6 distinct voices. Now he counted 4, then 3. The sounds moved deeper into the forest, away from his hiding spot, but he didn't dare look. His hands clutched the rough bark of the fallen log, splinters digging into his palms. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, footsteps approached. Light, controlled. Milo's breath caught. "It's me," Aldrich said softly. "You can look now." Milo lifted his head cautiously. Aldrich stood there, his clothes torn and spotted with blood, though Milo couldn't tell if it was his own or someone else's. Behind him, 4 men knelt in the dirt, their hands bound behind their backs with their own belts. They looked terrified. "I left 2 alive," Aldrich said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "The others fled. They'll spread word that attacking me was a mistake." He crouched down to eye level with the captured hunters. "Now, let's talk about the boy you're holding." The hunters exchanged glances. One of them, a young guy with a buzz cut, spat at Aldrich's feet. "Go to hell, bloodsucker." Aldrich didn't even blink. He simply stared at the man with those ancient, terrible eyes until the hunter's bravado crumbled like wet paper. "The boy," Aldrich repeated. "Where is he?" "We don't know about any boy," another hunter stammered. "We were just told to watch this road, stop anyone heading north." "Liar." Aldrich's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow seemed louder than shouting. "I can hear your heartbeat spike when you lie. Try again." The hunter with the buzz cut broke first. Coldspire. They took the kid to an outpost at Coldspire. It's a staging area, reinforced with silver barriers. We're just perimeter guards. We don't know the details. How many hunters at the outpost? 20, maybe 30? It's a major operation. The collector's been planning this for months. The hunter's voice trembled. "Look, man, we're just following orders. Nobody told us the kid had connections to you." Aldrich grabbed the hunter by his collar, lifting him slightly off the ground. "The boy doesn't have connections to me. He hired me for $10 to find his brother, and I keep my word." He released the hunter, who fell backward into the dirt. "The outpost," Milo said suddenly, stepping out from behind the log despite his fear. "Is my brother there? Is Jonah okay?" The hunters looked at Milo with something like guilt. The youngest, barely 20, with red hair and freckles, spoke up. "We saw them bring in a teenager 2 nights ago. Brown hair, about 15. They've got him in the holding area. He's scared, but not hurt. They're keeping him fed, comfortable." "Why?" Milo demanded. "Why did you take him?" The hunters fell silent, exchanging nervous glances. "Answer him," Aldrich said dangerously. "We don't know," Buzzcut said quickly. "The collector doesn't explain her plans. We just follow orders." But Aldrich could hear the lie. They knew. They all knew. And the careful way they avoided looking at him told him everything. They'd taken Jonah as bait to lure Aldrich out of his castle, into the open, where the Silverthorn Guild could spring whatever trap they'd prepared. And like a fool, he'd walked right into it, with a child at his side. Aldrich stood abruptly. "How far to the outpost?" 10 miles north, but you'll never get in. It's a fortress." "We'll see." Aldrich turned to Milo. "Come, we're losing time." As they walked back toward the wrecked Cadillac, Milo looked up at the Vampire King. "Are you hurt?" "I heal quickly," Aldrich said shortly. "We'll continue on foot. Stay close and stay quiet." Behind them, the captured hunters watched as the Vampire King and the small boy disappeared into the dark forest, heading straight into danger. "We should warn them," the red-haired hunter whispered. "The collector's going to slaughter them." Buzzcut shook his head grimly. "Did you see what he just did to our team? I almost feel sorry for the collector." They walked for hours through the forest, Aldrich moving with silent precision, while Milo stumbled over roots and rocks, trying desperately to keep up. The temperature dropped as they climbed higher into the mountain foothills, and Milo's breath came out in white puffs. Finally, Aldrich stopped in a small clearing beside a stream. "We'll rest here for a few hours. You need sleep." "I'm fine," Milo protested, though his legs trembled with exhaustion. "You're a 10-year-old who's been awake for nearly 24 hours. Sleep."
While Milo collapsed onto a flat rock, Aldrich gathered dry wood with inhuman speed and started a fire without matches, just a sharp strike of 2 stones that sent sparks into the kindling. Within minutes, flames crackled cheerfully, casting dancing shadows across the clearing. Milo held his hands toward the warmth, finally allowing himself to feel how cold and scared he really was. His red jacket was torn at the elbow from diving behind that log. His sneakers were soaked through. And somewhere out there, Jonah was locked in a fortress surrounded by people who wanted to hurt Aldrich. "Eat," Aldrich said, tossing Milo a granola bar he'd taken from the wrecked car. "You'll need your strength." Milo unwrapped it mechanically, taking small bites without tasting anything. The silence stretched between them, filled only by crackling fire and night sounds. Crickets, distant owls, the whisper of wind through pine trees. "Can I ask you something?" Milo said finally. Aldrich sat cross-legged on the opposite side of the fire, his face half in shadow. "You can ask." "Why did you really agree to help me? The $10 thing is... you're a king. You could buy anything you want. So why?" Aldrich was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "Why do you think?" "I don't know. That's why I'm asking." "Perhaps I was bored. 800 years is a long time. Eternity becomes repetitive." "I don't believe that," Milo said softly. Aldrich's eyes flicked up, surprised. "No?" "No. I think maybe you're not as scary as everyone says. I think maybe you agreed because it was the right thing to do." A strange expression crossed Aldrich's face, something between amusement and pain. "I've killed people, Milo. Many people over centuries. I am exactly as frightening as they say." "But you haven't killed me. You saved me from those bullets. You could have just taken the information from those hunters and left, but you made sure they knew not to harm kids." Milo met his eyes across the fire. "You're a better person than you pretend to be." Aldrich looked away sharply. "You know nothing about me." "Then tell me something. Tell me one true thing about you." The Vampire King sat in silence for so long that Milo thought he wouldn't answer. Then, very quietly, Aldrich spoke. "I had a sister once. Human. I was human too, before I was turned." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Her name was Elena. She was 8 years old when a plague came through our village. I watched her die in 3 days. There was nothing I could do." He paused. "That was 783 years ago, and I still remember her face exactly." Milo's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a lifetime ago. Many lifetimes." But Aldrich's voice carried a weight that suggested time hadn't healed that particular wound at all. "Is that why you help kids? Because of your sister?" "I don't help kids," Aldrich said sharply. "I simply choose not to harm them. There's a difference." "You're helping me." "That's different. You paid me." Milo reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled receipt from a gas station, something he'd been carrying for days. On the back, in careful pencil, he'd written, "Jonah's cake, chocolate, $10. This is what the money was really for." Milo's voice broke. "It's his birthday next week, 15. He wanted to learn to drive, and Dad was going to teach him, and Mom was planning the surprise party, and I was supposed to buy the cake because Jonah always shares his birthday cake with me ever since I was little. He cuts the first slice and gives it to me before he even takes his own." Aldrich watched the boy cry, something uncomfortable twisting in his chest. This small, fragile family, a mother planning parties, a father teaching driving, 2 brothers sharing cake. It was so painfully human, so delicate, so unlike the humans who'd hunted his kind for centuries, who'd burned his friends and staked them in their sleep. "We'll find him," Aldrich heard himself say, "and he'll have his birthday, with cake." Milo wiped his eyes on his torn sleeve. "You promise?" Aldrich should have said no, should have explained that promises were dangerous, that nothing was certain, that the Silverthorn Guild was powerful, and this rescue might be impossible. but instead he said, "I promise." Milo's shoulders relaxed slightly. He curled up near the fire, using his jacket as a pillow. "Thank you for not lying to me about the scary stuff. I mean, everyone else treats me like a baby, but you tell me the truth." Aldrich said nothing, because he was lying about the biggest thing of all. He knew why they'd taken Jonah, knew this was a trap, knew that telling Milo the truth would shatter what little hope the boy had left. So he sat by the fire through the long night, keeping watch, and carried the weight of his lie alone. Dawn broke, cold and gray over the cold Spire Mountains. Milo woke shivering, the campfire reduced to smoking embers. Aldrich stood at the edge of the clearing, staring up at the snow-capped peaks that loomed above them like jagged teeth. "We need to move," Aldrich said without turning around. "The outpost is up there, another 6 miles, mostly vertical." Milo struggled to his feet, his muscles screaming in protest. Every part of him ached from yesterday's chaos, the car crash, the running, sleeping on cold ground, but he forced himself to stand straight. Jonah had been missing for 3 days now. 3 days of fear and confusion. Milo wouldn't let him wait any longer. They started climbing. The forest path quickly gave way to rocky terrain, slick with morning frost. Milo's sneakers, never meant for mountain hiking, slipped on nearly every step. His hands were raw from grabbing at rocks and branches to keep his balance. The air grew thinner, colder, until each breath felt like swallowing ice. Aldrich moved ahead with effortless grace, never once losing his footing, but he kept glancing back to check on Milo's progress. After the first hour, the boy was falling farther and farther behind. "I'm okay," Milo gasped when Aldrich stopped to wait. "Just give me a minute." "We don't have minutes. The higher we climb, the more exposed we are." Aldrich looked at the sky with barely concealed concern. "And if the sun breaks through those clouds?" "I said I'm okay," Milo snapped, then immediately felt guilty. "Sorry, I can do this." But 20 minutes later, Milo stumbled on a patch of ice and went down hard, skinning both palms on sharp rocks. He bit his lip to keep from crying out, but tears leaked from his eyes anyway, from pain, from exhaustion, from the overwhelming fear that he wasn't strong enough for this. Aldrich appeared beside him instantly. "Let me see." "I'm fine." "You're bleeding, and you can barely stand." Aldrich crouched down. "Get on my back." "What? No, I'm not a baby." "Milo." Aldrich's voice was firm, but not unkind. "Pride is admirable. Stupidity is not. We have 4 more miles of climbing, and at your current pace, we won't arrive until nightfall. By then, they might have moved your brother. Now get on my back."
Milo hesitated, humiliation burning his cheeks, but his legs were shaking so badly he wasn't sure he could take another step. Reluctantly, he climbed onto Aldrich's back, wrapping his arms around the Vampire King's neck. "Hold tight," Aldrich said. Then he started climbing. It was like riding a freight train. Aldrich moved up the mountain with supernatural speed and strength, never wavering, never slowing. He leaped across gaps that would have taken Milo 10 minutes to navigate, scaled rock faces that should have required ropes and harnesses. Within an hour, they'd covered more ground than Milo could have managed in an entire day. "This is insane," Milo breathed, watching the world blur past. "This is efficiency," Aldrich corrected. "Though I admit carrying passengers isn't something I do often." "When's the last time you carried someone?" Aldrich was quiet for a moment. "Elena, my sister. When she got too tired to walk home from the market, I'd carry her on my shoulders, and she'd laugh the whole way." His voice softened with memory. "She'd pull my hair and pretend to be a great explorer discovering new lands." "She sounds nice." She was. Stubborn, though, like someone else I know. Milo almost smiled, but then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Along the cliffside, carved into rock faces and tied to trees, were signs, symbols, warning markers. Aldrich, what are those? Aldrich's expression darkened. Territory markers. The Silverthorn Guild is claiming this entire mountain as their hunting ground. He studied the symbols more closely. But these are fresh, put up within the last week. What does that mean? It means this isn't just about your brother anymore. They're preparing for something bigger, much bigger. Aldrich spotted another marker, this one spray-painted on a boulder, a silver cross wrapped in barbed wire with numbers beneath it, 11/20/25. Tomorrow's date. They're gathering for an assault. Aldrich muttered, more to himself than Milo. A coordinated strike against vampire territories across the region. Your brother's kidnapping, it's just one piece of a larger operation. But why take Jonah at all? What's he got to do with vampires? Aldrich's jaw tightened. He wanted to tell Milo the truth, that Jonah was bait, that the Silverthorn Guild had researched Aldrich's one weakness and exploited it perfectly. But looking at the exhausted, frightened boy clinging to his back, Aldrich couldn't bring himself to destroy what little hope remained. They likely mistook him for someone else, Aldrich said, hating himself for the lie. Wrong place, wrong time. The guild operates in the shadows. Sometimes they grab people just to create leverage or confusion. It was a weak explanation, and Aldrich could tell Milo sensed something was off. But the boy didn't press. Maybe he didn't want to know the why when the what mattered more. They climbed higher into the snow zone, where pine trees gave way to bare rock and bitter wind. In the distance, through swirling snow flurries, Milo saw it. A wooden structure built into the mountainside, reinforced with metal and surrounded by high fences. The outpost. There, Aldrich said grimly. That's where they're keeping your brother. Milo stared at the fortress, his heart sinking. It looked impossible, impenetrable. But Aldrich was already planning their approach, his ancient mind calculating angles and weaknesses. Rest, Aldrich said, setting Milo down behind a cluster of boulders. When the sun sets, we move. Time was running out. They watched the outpost for hours, hidden behind snow-covered rocks as the afternoon sun crept across the sky. Aldrich remained perfectly still, his eyes tracking every movement below. Guards changing shifts, supply trucks arriving, the regular patrol patterns around the perimeter. Milo tried to stay patient, but every minute felt like torture. Jonah was down there somewhere, behind those walls, probably terrified and alone. There, Aldrich whispered, pointing to the eastern fence. They rotate guards every 2 hours. There's a 40-second gap when the old guard leaves before the new one arrives. That's our window. 40 seconds isn't much time. It's enough. Aldrich studied the compound layout. The main building has 3 entrances, front gate, loading dock, and an emergency exit on the north side, all heavily monitored. But they've made a mistake. What mistake? They built their fortress to keep vampires out. Silver reinforced doors, UV floodlights, blessed barriers. Aldrich's eyes gleamed. But those defenses are designed to stop someone breaking in with force. They're not expecting someone to break in with a distraction. Milo understood immediately. You need me to get their attention. I need you to be very brave and very careful. Aldrich met his eyes seriously. Can you throw rocks at that watchtower? Make noise, get the guards looking your way, then run back here. That's the plan? Throw rocks? Sometimes the simplest plans work best. While they're distracted, I'll slip inside through the shadows, find your brother, get him out. What if they catch me? They won't. You're fast, you're small, and you'll have a head start. But Milo, Aldrich gripped his shoulder firmly. If something goes wrong, if they get too close, you run. You don't wait for me. You don't try to be a hero. You run back down the mountain and you find help. Understood? Milo nodded, though his hands were shaking. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the compound, they moved into position. Milo crept along the tree line until he was within throwing distance of the eastern watchtower. His pockets bulged with rocks he'd collected. He looked back once. Aldrich gave a single nod. Milo threw the first rock. It cracked against the watchtower's metal siding with a loud clang. Immediately, a guard's head appeared over the railing, scanning the forest. Milo threw another, then another, each one hitting the tower like a drum beat. "Hey, someone's out there!" the guard shouted, raising his rifle. "East perimeter!" More guards rushed toward the tower, their attention fully focused on the tree line. Searchlights swung towards Milo's position. "I see movement, 50 yards out!" Milo grinned, despite his terror. Then he turned and ran, crashing through underbrush deliberately and loudly, making sure they heard every step. Behind him, shouts erupted. Boots pounded across frozen ground. "After him! Don't let him escape!" But Milo was already zigzagging through the trees, using his small size to slip through gaps the adults couldn't follow easily. His heart hammered wildly as he led them farther from the compound, exactly as planned. Meanwhile, on the opposite side, Aldrich moved like a living shadow. With the guards distracted, he scaled the fence in seconds, dropped silently into the compound, and pressed himself against the main building's wall. The UV floodlights couldn't track what they couldn't see. He slipped through a loading dock door, left carelessly ajar, finding himself in a dimly lit corridor. The smell hit him immediately. Human fear, stale coffee, gun oil, and something else. The metallic tang of silver. Aldrich moved through the outpost like a ghost, checking rooms quickly and silently. Storage, armory, communications room, barracks. Then he found the holding area. 3 cells built with silver bars. 2 were empty. The third contained a sleeping bag, a tray of half-eaten food, and a brown-haired teenager sitting with his knees pulled to his chest. Jonah Chin. The boy looked up as Aldrich approached, his eyes widening in terror. He scrambled backwards until he hit the cell's rear wall. "Stay away from me," he whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you. Your brother sent me." Milo?" Confusion replaced some of the fear. "What are you talking about?" "Milo hired me to find you. I'm getting you out." Aldrich examined the cell door. The lock was complex, reinforced with silver that burned his fingers when he touched it. He gritted his teeth and forced himself to grip it anyway, ignoring the searing pain as his skin blistered. "You're a vampire. Oh God, Milo hired a vampire." "The Vampire King, actually. And your brother paid me $10, which makes this officially the worst deal I've ever made." The lock clicked. "There, let's go." Jonah didn't move. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I just burned my hands opening that door. Because your little brother walked into my castle alone and demanded I help him. And because—"
The command in his voice was absolute. Jonah found himself obeying before he'd made a conscious decision, stepping out of the cell. They'd made it 3 steps down the corridor when Aldrich froze. On the wall, illuminated by emergency lighting, was a large map covered in pins and photographs. Strategic locations marked across 5 states, vampire safe houses, known feeding grounds, meeting places. And in the center, pinned prominently, was a photograph of Aldrich himself. Beneath it, written in bold red marker, "Arrival estimated November 19th. Primary target acquired." Jonah followed Aldrich's gaze and went pale. They weren't after me at all. They wanted you. I know, Aldrich said quietly. You knew this whole time? Yes. Does Milo? No. And you won't tell him? Aldrich turned, his eyes burning crimson. Not until this is over. Before Jonah could respond, alarms erupted throughout the compound. Red lights flashed. Steel doors slammed shut. They'd been discovered. And somewhere outside, Milo was still running. Aldrich grabbed Jonah's arm and pulled him down a side corridor as heavy footsteps thundered through the outpost. The alarm screamed, red emergency lights strobing across metal walls. Emergency protocols activated, a woman's voice echoed through speakers. All units converge on holding area. The target is inside. I repeat, the Vampire King is inside. The target, Jonah hissed as they ran. They meant you all along. I was just bait. Yes. Aldrich yanked him around a corner just as guards flooded the hallway they'd abandoned. We can discuss my failures later. Right now, we survive. They burst through a door into what looked like a command center, banks of monitors showing camera feeds from around the compound. Aldrich's eyes scanned them rapidly until he found what he was looking for. Milo. The boy had circled back, just as Aldrich had feared he would. On the monitor, Milo crouched behind a supply crate near the main gate, clearly trying to figure out how to get inside. The guards who had chased him were regrouping, closing in on his position from 3 sides. Your brother's an idiot, Aldrich muttered. He's 10, Jonah shot back, and he came here for me. That's not idiocy. That's... His voice cracked. That's Milo. Aldrich spotted a radio on the console. He grabbed it and cycled through frequencies until he heard chatter. East Perimeter, kid couldn't have gone far. Forget the kid, the king is priority 1. The collector wants them both alive. She's en route now, ETA 10 minutes. Aldrich clicked off the radio, his mind racing. 10 minutes before the collector arrived. They needed to get Milo and escape before then. But the entire compound was on lockdown. There, Jonah said suddenly, pointing at a monitor. That loading dock. The truck that brought me here, it's still there. Keys are probably in the cab. If we can reach it. The loading dock is on the opposite side from your brother. So we split up. I get the truck, drive it to the main gate. You grab Milo, we crash through and go. Aldrich stared at the teenager. You're 15. Can you even drive? Dad's been teaching me in parking lots. I can handle it. This is insane. You have a better idea? Aldrich didn't have, and time was bleeding away. He made a decision that would have horrified him 800 years ago, trusting a human child with their escape. 5 minutes. If I'm not there... You'll be there, Jonah said firmly. Milo believes in you. That's good enough for me. They split up at the next junction. Jonah headed left toward the loading area, while Aldrich moved right toward the main gate and the small boy hiding there. Outside, Milo heard the alarms and understood with sinking dread that something had gone wrong. He should run. Aldrich had told him to run if things went bad. But Jonah was in there, and so was Aldrich. He couldn't just leave them. So instead of running, Milo did something incredibly stupid. He stood up and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Hey, I'm right here. Come get me." Every guard in the compound turned toward the sound. Milo saw them coming and bolted towards the main building, not away from it, but directly at it, his sneakers slapping against frozen ground. A guard moved to intercept him. Milo ducked under his arms, sliding between his legs like he was stealing home base. Another guard grabbed for him. Milo twisted away, his small size suddenly an advantage. Somebody catch that kid. Milo crashed through an unlocked door and found himself in a hallway full of surprised hunters. He kept running, taking random turns, completely lost, but moving on pure adrenaline and terror. Then a familiar figure stepped out of the shadows ahead. Aldrich, Milo gasped. What part of run away was unclear. But there was something almost like relief in Aldrich's eyes. He grabbed Milo's hand. Come. Now. They ran together through the maze of corridors, Aldrich somehow knowing exactly which turns to take. Behind them, hunters gave chase, their shouts echoing off metal walls. They burst out into the loading area, just as the supply truck's engine roared to life. Jonah sat in the driver's seat, his face pale but determined. Give in, he shouted through the open window. Jonah! Milo's face lit up with pure joy. Aldrich threw open the passenger door and literally tossed Milo inside before climbing in himself. Drive. Now. Jonah slammed the gas pedal. The truck lurched forward, engine screaming. Guards scattered as the massive vehicle barreled towards the closed main gate. They're not opening it, Jonah yelled. Don't stop, Aldrich commanded. We'll crash. Drive. Jonah closed his eyes and pressed the pedal to the floor. The truck hit the gate at 40 miles per hour, metal shrieking as it tore through reinforced barriers like they were made of paper. They crashed through in an explosion of twisted steel and broken wood, the truck fishtailing wildly before Jonah regained control. In the passenger seat, Milo looked up at his brother with tears streaming down his face. You're okay. You're really okay. Of course I'm okay, you little maniac. Jonah's voice was thick with emotion. But you, walking into a vampire castle? Are you insane? He promised to help, Milo said simply, looking at Aldrich. Jonah glanced at the vampire king, then back at the road. You knew they were using me to trap you, and you came anyway. I made a promise, Aldrich said quietly. To a 10-year-old? For $10? The amount was irrelevant. Behind them, the outpost erupted with activity, vehicles starting, hunters mobilizing. But they had a head start, and night was falling fast. Then Milo heard it. Through the chaos, a voice on a radio someone had left on in the truck cab. All units, this is the collector. They took the bait beautifully. Phase 2 is now active. Let them think they've escaped. The real trap is waiting at the Silverthorn Fortress. Have the boys' family brought there immediately. When the king comes for them, we'll have everything we need. Milo's blood ran cold. Mom and Dad. They're going after Mom and Dad. Aldrich's expression went dark as midnight. The hunt wasn't over. It had only just begun. The Silverthorn Fortress loomed against the night sky like something out of a nightmare. A converted military bunker built into the mountainside, all concrete and steel and malevolent purpose. Spotlights swept across its perimeter in mechanical patterns, and guard towers rose at each corner like watchful sentries. Aldrich parked the stolen truck 2 miles away, hidden in a dense grove of trees. Inside the cab, the three of them sat in heavy silence. This is different from the outpost, Aldrich said finally. Silverthorn is their main base. Everything inside will be designed specifically to kill vampires. Silver everywhere, UV lights, blessed water in the ventilation systems. It's a death trap. My parents are in there, Milo said, his voice small but determined. We have to get them. We will. Aldrich studied the fortress through binoculars he'd found in the truck's glove compartment. But there has to be another way.
Jonah pulled out a crumpled map he'd grabbed from the outpost. When they brought me in, I heard guards talking about drainage tunnels, old military infrastructure from when this place was an active base. They use them for waste disposal now. He traced a line on the map. If we can find the outlet, we might be able to get inside without being detected. Drainage tunnels? Aldrich repeated. You mean sewers? You're 800 years old. I figured you've seen worse. Despite everything, Aldrich almost smiled. Fair point. They found the drainage outlet 20 minutes later. A rusted grate, half hidden by overgrown bushes, water trickling out into a rocky stream. The smell was exactly as terrible as expected. I'll go, Milo said immediately. Absolutely not, Aldrich and Jonah said in unison. I'm the smallest. I can fit through easier. And if something goes wrong, you two are stronger. You can fight your way out. Milo looked between them. It makes sense, and you know it. Aldrich wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed against sending a child into danger, but Milo was right. His small size was an advantage in the narrow tunnels, and they needed Aldrich's strength and speed for when things inevitably went wrong. You get in, you find your parents, you get them to the tunnel exit, Aldrich said firmly. No heroics, no detours. In and out. What about you? I'll create a distraction. Something loud enough to pull most of the guards away from the detention area. Aldrich's eyes gleamed crimson. They wanted to trap a vampire king? Let's give them what they asked for. Jonah grabbed Milo's shoulder before his brother could climb into the tunnel. Be careful. And Milo, thank you for coming after me, for not giving up. Milo hugged him fiercely. Brothers don't give up on each other. Then he was gone, crawling into the darkness of the drainage tunnel, his red jacket disappearing into shadow. Aldrich watched him go, that uncomfortable feeling twisting in his chest again. If anything happens to him. It won't, Jonah said. Milo's tougher than he looks. Takes after our mom. Tell me about them. Your family. Jonah seemed surprised by the question. Dad's a mechanic. Works too much, but always makes time for us. Mom's a teacher. 3rd grade. She does this thing where she makes pancakes shaped like animals on Sundays. His voice softened. They're good people. They don't deserve this. No, Aldrich agreed quietly. They don't. Inside the tunnel, Milo crawled through filth and darkness, trying not to think about what he was touching or breathing. Water dripped from above, and the sound of his breathing echoed eerily. But he kept moving, following the tunnel as it sloped upward into the fortress itself. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes, he saw light ahead, a grate looking into what appeared to be a storage room. Milo pressed his face against the metal bars, checking for guards. Empty. He pushed against the grate. It was loose, corroded by years of moisture. With effort, he managed to work it free enough to squeeze through, dropping into the storage room with a soft thud. His heart hammered as he crept to the door and peered out. A long corridor stretched in both directions, industrial and cold. Signs on the walls pointed to different sections: armory, command center, detention block. Milo headed for detention. He moved like Aldrich had taught him during their journey, staying close to walls, minimizing his profile, pausing to listen before rounding corners. Twice he had to duck into alcoves as guards passed, his hands shaking the entire time. Then he heard his mother's voice. "Someone will come for us. Our boys are smart. They'll get help." "Nobody's coming, lady. Your kids are probably dead already. The king doesn't leave witnesses." Rage flooded through Milo. He stepped around the corner before he could think better of it. "Hey," he shouted, "my brother's alive, and the king kept his promise." The guard spun around, shock crossing his face. "What the—" Milo didn't wait. He ran straight at the detention door, which stood partially open, and dove through. Inside, his parents sat handcuffed to chairs, their faces reflecting shock and overwhelming relief. "Milo!" his mother gasped. "No time," Milo panted, working at her handcuffs with shaking fingers. "We have to go now." Outside, an explosion rocked the fortress. Aldrich had begun his distraction. Alarms screamed, guards shouted, heavy footsteps thundered past the detention room as hunters mobilized toward the threat. The guard who'd been watching Milo's parents rushed out, leaving them momentarily alone. Milo finally got his mother's cuffs open, then moved to his father's. "How did you get here?" his father asked urgently. "Long story. Involves a vampire king and $10. "What?" "I said long story." The cuffs clicked open. They were free. "The tunnel," Milo said, grabbing his mother's hand. "This way." They ran back through the corridors, Milo retracing his path with desperate speed. Behind them, the fortress shook with violence. Aldrich rampaged, drawing every available hunter toward the main gates. They reached the storage room, the tunnel entrance. "You want us to crawl through that?" his mother asked, looking at the filthy grate. "Unless you want to fight vampire hunters." She crawled through without another word. They emerged from the drainage tunnel gasping and filthy, covered in things Milo didn't want to think about. Jonah was there waiting, his face flooding with relief when he saw them all. "Mom! Dad!" He grabbed them both in a fierce hug. "Jonah, thank God!" Mrs. Chin's voice broke. "We thought—" "No time for reunions," Milo interrupted, looking back towards the fortress. Explosions continued to light up the night sky. Then a section of the fortress wall exploded outward in a shower of concrete and rebar. Through the dust and debris, a figure walked calmly into the moonlight. Aldrich. His clothes were shredded, exposing pale skin marked with burns and cuts that were already healing. Blood, both his own and others, stained his hands and face. Behind him, the fortress burned, sirens wailing, hunters scrambling towards the threat, but he'd bought them the time they needed. "Everyone here," Aldrich called out, his voice tight with pain he was trying to hide. "All accounted for," Jonah confirmed. "Then we run." They ran through the forest, the Chin family struggling to keep pace, while Aldrich moved ahead, clearing obstacles and finding the safest path. Milo stayed close to his parents, his heart soaring despite the danger. They'd done it. They'd actually rescued everyone. Behind them, shouts erupted, flashlight beams cut through the darkness. "They're pursuing," Aldrich said grimly. "Faster." "We're going as fast as we can," Mr. Chin panted. Aldrich grabbed both parents without ceremony. lifting Mrs. Chin over one shoulder and Mr. Chin over the other like they weighed nothing. Hold on. Then he ran with supernatural speed, Jonah and Milo sprinting to keep up. The forest became a blur. Branches whipped past. The sounds of pursuit grew distant. They'd covered perhaps half a mile when Aldrich suddenly stopped, setting the parents down and going completely still. "What is it?" Milo whispered. "We're surrounded." Red laser sights appeared in the darkness, dozens of them, painting targets on trees, rocks, and people. Hunters emerged from concealment in a perfect circle, assault rifles trained on the group. They'd been herded, Aldrich realized, driven into a kill zone. "Well, well," a voice cut through the night. "The legendary Vampire King. So nice of you to join our little trap." She stepped into a shaft of moonlight, tall, middle-aged, wearing a long black coat and an expression of cold satisfaction. The Collector. "You've caused quite a bit of damage tonight. 17 of my hunters injured, 3 killed, millions in equipment destroyed." She smiled without warmth. "But it was worth it. You're the prize I've been hunting for 5 years. "Let the family go," Aldrich said. "Your quarrel is with me." "Oh, but they're leverage, insurance. You vampires always claim to be monsters, but I've studied you, Aldrich. You're soft, sentimental. You won't risk their lives to escape." "You don't know what I'll risk?" "Don't I?"
The Collector gestured, and 2 hunters dragged Milo forward, forcing him to his knees between them. "Let's test that theory. Surrender yourself. Allow us to take you alive, or the boy dies." Mrs. Chin screamed. Mr. Chin lunged forward, but was immediately restrained by guards. Aldrich's eyes blazed crimson, and for a moment Milo saw the full, terrifying power of an ancient vampire king barely contained. The temperature seemed to drop. Shadows writhed. "You're making a mistake," Aldrich said, his voice deadly quiet. "The only mistake was yours, caring about humans." The Collector pulled out a silver dagger. "Last chance. Surrender, or—" Jonah moved. He'd been standing slightly apart from the group, unnoticed by the hunters who were focused on Aldrich and Milo. Now he grabbed a fallen branch and swung it with all his strength at the nearest hunter, catching him across the face. Chaos erupted. The hunter's attention split for just a second. Aldrich moved like lightning, disarming 3 guards before they could react. Mr. Chin tackled another. The perfect kill zone collapsed into confused combat. "Run!" Aldrich roared at the family. "Get to the truck!" Milo scrambled to his feet, his mother grabbing his hand and pulling him toward the trees. Behind them, Aldrich fought with controlled fury, trying to create an opening for them to escape. But the Collector was ready. She raised a crossbow, a modified weapon with silver-tipped bolts, and took aim. Not at Aldrich. At Milo and Jonah, who were running side by side 20 feet away. She fired. The bolt cut through the air with a whistle. Aldrich heard it and understood, in the space between heartbeats, that he couldn't reach them in time, couldn't block it, couldn't save them, unless he launched himself across the impossible distance, moving faster than he had in centuries, his body screaming in protest. He reached the brothers just as the silver-tipped bolt arrived and stepped directly into its path. The bolt hit Aldrich square in the chest, punching through his sternum and lodging near his heart. Silver, burning, agonizing. He collapsed, blood spreading across his shredded shirt. "No!" Milo screamed, dropping to his knees beside the fallen vampire. "No! No! No!" "Run!" Aldrich gasped, his face twisted in pain. Silver poisoning spread through his system like wildfire. "Leave me! Run!" "Not a chance," Jonah said fiercely. He grabbed one of Aldrich's arms while Milo grabbed the other. "We're getting you out of here." "You can't. I'm too heavy." "Shut up and let us try," Milo sogged. The brothers pulled with all their strength, dragging the vampire king toward the tree line. Their parents appeared on Aldrich's other side, helping lift and carry him, despite their own exhaustion and terror. Behind them, the Collector screamed orders. "After them! Don't let them escape!" But something happened that nobody expected. The hunters hesitated.
They'd just watched two children and their parents refuse to abandon the monster they'd been taught to fear, watched a vampire take a killing blow meant for humans, watched a family, fragile, mortal, powerless, choose loyalty over survival. "What are you waiting for?" the collector shrieked. "Shoot them!" Several hunters lowered their weapons. "This isn't right. They're just kids." "I said fire!" But the moment had passed. The Chin family disappeared into the forest, carrying their unlikely savior into the darkness. Behind them, the Silverthorn Guild fractured under the weight of a moral question they'd never expected to face. They made it to a village called Pinewood just as dawn broke, a small cluster of houses and shops nestled in a valley, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and strangers were noticed immediately. Aldrich was barely conscious, his skin burning hot, despite vampires running cold. The silver bolt still protruded from his chest, and black veins spread from the wound like poisonous roots. Every breath was agony. The Chin family carried him into the first building they found, a general store just opening for the day. The owner, an elderly woman named Martha, took one look at the bloody, desperate group and immediately locked the door behind them. "Upstairs," she said without questions. "There's a room in the back." They laid Aldrich on a bed in a small storage room above the shop. Milo refused to leave his side, even when his mother tried to pull him away. "He's dying," Mrs. Chin whispered to her husband. "That wound, the silver." "I know," Mr. Chin's face was grim, "but he saved our sons, twice. We owe him this much." Martha returned with water, clean cloths, and a pair of pliers. She looked at Aldrich with calculating eyes. "Silver poisoning. Seen it once before. 50 years back. Another vampire cornered by hunters." She rolled up her sleeves. "I'll do what I can, but I can't promise anything." "Why would you help him?" Jonah asked, confused. "Because he's in my home, and I don't let people die in my home if I can help it, vampire, human, or otherwise." She looked at the family. "Besides, word travels fast in these mountains. We've been hearing stories for 2 days. A vampire king traveling with a child, fighting hunters, saving people. Makes a person curious about the truth." Martha worked on Aldrich for over an hour, finally extracting the silver bolt with a sickening squelch. Black blood poured from the wound. Aldrich convulsed, his eyes rolling back. "Hold him down," Martha commanded. They did. Milo gripped Aldrich's hand with fierce determination. "You don't dare die," the boy whispered. You promised we'd get Jonah back, and he'd have his birthday cake. You keep your promises." Whether Aldrich heard him or not, no one could say. But slowly, painfully, the black veins began to recede. The wound started to close. Vampire healing finally overcame the silver poisoning. By mid-morning, he'd stabilized into a deep, death-like sleep. That's when the hunters arrived. Milo heard them first. Vehicles pulling into the village square, doors slamming, raised voices. He ran to the window and his heart sunk. Dozens of them, armed, organized. The collector stood at their center, directing teams to search each building. "They're here," Milo said, his voice hollow. Mr. Chin moved to the window. "There's too many. We can't fight." "We don't have to fight," Mrs. Chin said suddenly. She looked at her husband with the same determination Milo had shown 3 days ago. "We just have to make it very, very difficult for them to do the wrong thing." 5 minutes later, the Chin family walked out of the general store into the village square. Milo carried a makeshift sign reading, "The Vampire King saved us." Jonah held another, "He protected children." The collector spotted them immediately, her face twisting with rage. "Seize them." Hunters moved forward. Mrs. Chin stepping in front of her sons, arms spread wide. "You'll have to go through me first." "And me," said Martha, emerging from her store. "And me," said the blacksmith from across the square, carrying his hammer. "And us," said more villagers filing out of their homes and shops, forming a human wall between the hunters and the Chin family. The collector stared in disbelief. "These people are harboring a vampire, a monster." "That monster took an arrow meant for 2 children," Martha said loudly. "I saw the wound. Silver through the heart.
He should be dead, but he spent his last strength getting these kids to safety. He's killed people, the collector shouted. He's a predator. So are you, Milo said, his young voice cutting through the tension. He stepped forward despite his mother trying to hold him back. You took my brother. You threatened our family. You tried to kill us. The only person acting like a monster here is you. Murmurs ran through the crowd, villagers and hunters alike. A young hunter at the back lowered his rifle. The kids got a point. Silence! The collector's composure was cracking. You're under orders. Orders to hunt vampires who threaten humans, another hunter interrupted. Not to murder children and their families. Not to attack someone being defended by the very people we're supposed to protect.
The collector pulled out her pistol. If you won't do your jobs, I will. Stand aside or what? Mr. Chin stepped forward. You'll shoot me in front of 50 witnesses? Kill a father protecting his children? Go ahead. Show everyone what the Silverthorn Guild really stands for. The collector's hand trembled with fury, but she was trapped. Every eye was on her. Villagers with phones out recording, other hunters watching, judging. If she pulled that trigger, she'd turn public opinion irreversibly against the entire hunter organization. This was supposed to be simple. Capture the Vampire King, prove the guild's power. Instead, she'd created a martyr and turned children into heroes. This isn't over, the collector hissed. That vampire is a threat to humanity. He's my friend, Milo said simply, and friends protect each other. The collector stared at the small boy who'd ruined her carefully laid plans. Then, with visible effort, she holstered her weapon. Fall back, she commanded her hunters. We're leaving. Ma'am, the vampire... I said fall back. They retreated to their vehicles, tension radiating from every movement. The collector paused before climbing into her truck, looking back at Milo one last time. You've made a powerful enemy today, boy. Good, Milo said, not backing down despite his fear. He deserves powerful friends. The hunters left Pinewood in a convoy of defeat, leaving the village and the Chin family standing victorious in the morning sun. But the victory felt fragile, temporary. Everyone knew this was just one battle. The war between humans and vampires was far from over. Still, for today, in this small village, something remarkable had happened. A boy had believed in a monster, and that belief had changed everything.